I'd like to welcome each and every one of us to the workshop for today, the course of the presentation. If you have any points you may want to seek clarification for, you are free to raise your hand so that we can take note of it, and along the line and make sure that we clear whatever concerns that we may have as much as possible. This is a good time for us to commence. Once again, I welcome all of you to today's presentation. It is good afternoon to you. This is Psychometrics Concepts in Professional Certification Process, second session, and indeed a concluding session. So today we're going to be looking at a few more other concepts, especially those of them that are a little bit deeper than those ones that we discussed last month. And so before we get down into that, we would like to remind ourselves that psychometrics is a very important field in the aspects of test development. It has to do with the measurement of psychological constructs, which include intelligence, personality, attitudes, and that has been around. It has been around for quite some time, and indeed, it helps in professional testing to help to identify people who are taking it or who are taking a test, or those who will take that test. As the case may be, it helps to identify their strengths, their weaknesses, and how suitable they are for the roles that we are hoping to assign them to. That is to say, now, in the case where you have designed a test to use for a recruitment process, for instance, then the psychometric testing will help us to identify what areas are what we can classify as their strengths and what are their weaknesses, and also help to tell us what specific roles they will be best suited for. So it is a very germane thing to look at what psychometrics is when we're dealing with professional testing. Then, just to remind us again, psychometrics is a scientific study that measures some of the traits that we already enumerated earlier, the ability, the attitude, the knowledge, skills, and any of such constructs that can be measured. It involves, most of the times, the development, administration, and scoring, and of course, interpretation of tests, and the results that they produced. These are used to, come up with how suitable the individuals that we're testing are for the roles that we intend to assign to them. Okay, in professional testing, we could look at some of the areas that psychometrics focuses on as far as professional testing is concerned. Professional certification, for instance, is a process through which individuals are recognized as possessing the skills and knowledge that are required to succeed in a particular profession. I know that we have developed work with certification. Let me say, we have worked with some organizations that have certificate exams. For instance, the neonatal nurses that we worked with, at least to the best of my knowledge, last year. This group of people who possess, the test was designed to, to give them a form of a proof that makes them to be recognized as people who possess the skills and knowledge in order to practice the profession that they are in. So this is what professional certification is. And I would like also to talk about three key contributions of psychometrics in professional certification. Right, as we have seen, it helps to identify the knowledge, the skills, and abilities of people who work in a particular profession. And another thing is helps watch. I'm sorry, it's like I drop off, right?
Yeah, looks like you dropped off for a little bit.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. So psychometrics concepts are crucial in professional certification because they will help the certification managers. I wouldn't know who among us here is a certification manager or who heads professional development, the professional development section of the organization. It helps also the certificate vendors, whoever is the owner, and of course, the subject matter experts. These key three, let me call them these three key stakeholders, play a very important role in ensuring that let me say the three key cardinal points of certification are upheld. This means that every certification, no matter what it is designed for, it must be reliable, it must be valid, it must be unbiased, and indeed legally defensible. So when you design a test or you design an exam, it shouldn't discriminate against a certain group of the test takers in favor of one group. If you recall, for those of you who were around last month, I gave an instance about a test that I had sat for, where questions directly related to the Catholic folks came on that particular promotion exam. I am a Baptist, I am not a Catholic. And we could say that it's a little bit better for me than the folks who are entirely Muslims who didn't even have anything to do with Christianity. So you shouldn't be asking questions that pertains to a particular religion when you know that guys from other faiths, for instance, are also taking that test. So there are three key classification of stakeholders in certification. You have the certification managers. I mentioned that their job is to oversee the development and administration of the certification programs that are being run by the organization or association that they belong to. Then you have the certificate vendors. These are the organizations themselves that provide the certification services itself to individuals, to individuals and probably other organizations. Then you have the subject matter experts. These are people who possess sufficient knowledge and skill in a particular field or industry. To the point that if at any time you take one of them to come help solve a problem regarding that profession, they either will have a ready-made answer or a ready-made solution to offer to you, or that they at least know where to source additional information that will help you solve the problem regarding an exam, regarding anything actually that you intend to develop. I have mentioned that we worked with an association or an organization that deals with neonatal nurses. And in coming up with a test for those group of individuals that work in that particular industry, you do not, I mean that it is not right for you to rely on only us, the psychometrics experts, because of the fact that some of us, though we are psychometricians and we have a substantial knowledge of psychometrics, we may not necessarily be knowledgeable or sufficiently knowledgeable in the field that you want to develop the test for. But because of this fact, you are required, even by the what do you call it? I forgot the name, we call it now, but it's a standard that is set by, for instance, the United States and anywhere for that matter. Because of that, you are required to seek out people who themselves have practiced for a reasonable amount of time in that particular field. So in the case that I mentioned, you needed to go get nurses to come together and work with us, the psychometricians, to come up with the test items that form the exam for testing neonatal nurses. I mean, you needed to get neonatal nurses themselves to come sit with us to work together to come up with a test that will be used for certifying neonatal nurses. If you are working in the computer engineering field or software development or cybersecurity, whatever field that it is, you need to get folks that have sufficient experience, knowledge and experience in that particular industry to be used to help come up with a test. And these are the guys that you refer to as subject matter experts as far as the case of test development is concerned. Now, we will now begin to look at the key concepts, or let me say additional key concepts about psychometric, key psychometric concepts that are related to professional certification. One of them, which is the thing I want to mention here, is test security. The word security, I think, is very much a word or a concept that is quite very familiar to us. It is simply the process of safeguarding something, preventing it from being exposed to maybe danger if it's a thing that is susceptible to danger or destruction. In the case of a test security is a process of safeguarding the confidentiality and integrity of a certification exam, for every certification exam, to prevent any form of cheating or unauthorized access. Now, a test that you develop, it is very important that you ensure that it is not exposed to people that, especially the people that will be sitting for that same paper, or people close to those who will be sitting for that exam. If you fail to do this, you basically compromise the integrity of the test that you have put in place. Therefore, a lot of effort is required in ensuring that your test is secured and that the integrity of that your test or exam is intact. This helps to ensure that cheating does not take place and any form of unauthorized access is not granted to people who shouldn't be having access to your test. There are so many techniques that are used by certification programs to ensure that test security is guaranteed. For instance, the most common and the easiest of them all, that's where I think almost all of us are familiar with, is the use of proctors. People, physical human beings, are usually present in the examination hall during the process of the exam or the test to ensure that, number one, you do not have collusion among the test takers. And then you put measures in place to ensure that there is no, or there are no impersonations taking place. You will know, you will agree with me that under certain conditions or persons, for one reason or the other, used to can contract people who they believe will be able to deliver better results for that exam to them than they are capable of doing. They contract such persons to go sit for the exam for them. That's what we usually call that impersonation in our own client over here. All right, so and then you have other forms of monitoring the test takers. You could have the use of technology. CCTV cameras can be used. And then, of course, online proctoring software applications are also employed in ensuring that the integrity of the tests, at least during when the exam is being taken, is put in place. Then the process of properly banking items or tests before the time the testee will be exposed to it is also another step that is taken. And so many other steps that are taken by certification, certification vendors and organizations to ensure that they keep the integrity of the test intact. There are a few types of test security measures that are put in place. One of them is, again, the use of biometric authentication. Of course, where tests are taken online, there is a need for the testee to verify the biometrics machine is usually taken to the examination hall where testees are made to verify themselves using their thumbprints. I'm sorry, I needed to switch off the video camera just to strengthen the quality of the presentation. Then they also ensure that the testing environment is secure. And some I have read on the internet several, some people, some countries under examination conditions have had maybe friends or families coming around to offer them undue help or necessary help that they help to, that they hope to use to gain an advantage in the tests that they are taking. Another thing that can be done, this one is coming from the side of the test development or administration, is to randomize the test questions. What that means is that a typical example of that is where you maybe you have more than one person taking the same test. The first question that comes, let's say question number 1, is not necessarily the same thing as question number 1 for the next testee. This helps in ensuring that even if they want to communicate or collude in the course of the test, it will make it difficult because they will not be answering the same test or the same item for the same number that they both are treating. And again, sometimes test administrators take an extra step by ensuring that even the options are also randomized, just so that it will not have to be that question number one, if the key is option A, then for the next person it will be option C, just so that the collision that I talked about earlier will be minimized to the nearest possible level. Then there is this concept called test development. We will not spend too much of time on this one. The reason for that is that the next workshop is about test development itself. But just because it's a concept that is involved in psychometrics, I mean, that is to say that it's one of the psychometric concepts. At least a mention of it will not be out of place. So test development involves the creation of assessment tools that are designed to measure knowledge, skills, attitudes required for success in a particular profession. All right, so this is what test development can be construed as. Professional certification programs use various techniques to ensure that they develop the tests that have the required quality as much as they can possibly have. Such techniques are basically 3. One of them, the first actually is the one I have put last year, which is called item writing or item construction. I mentioned to us what an item is the other day. It is the part of an individual question, including all of these options. The one that a testee is supposed to attend or attend to in the course of writing or sitting for a particular test. Then also, if you have not forgotten, for those of you who were present, a test item can be divided into more than I think about 3 or 4 parts. First, it can be divided first into 2 main parts. That is what we call the item stem, and then if you like, you say responses, or you call them alternatives, or you call them options. Then the options or responses, which sometimes get labeled A, B, C, D, to as much as E or F, depending on the choice of the test developer. Those options also can be divided into 2, where you have what we call the key. The key is the correct response. It is the option that when you choose it, the marks allocated to that particular item will be given to you in full. Then there are the other ones. All other options that are not the correct response to that or the correct answer to that particular question they are referred to as distractors. We call them distractors in our own English over here, but then of course in American English you call them distractors. Then you have blueprints, or we call it test blueprints, sometimes called the table of specification. This we will talk in detail when we talk about test development, but then it's just like, as you hear the name test blueprint, it is a plan of how the tests will be constructed. I mean, the entire test, how many, for instance, how many items will come from content A, how many items will come from content B, how many items will come from content C, and so on and so forth. Then you have what is called task analysis. Task analysis talks about, for instance, when you assemble the subject matter experts, they will help the test vendor, that is the organization, alongside the psychometrician, to identify all the skills, all the tasks that are usually performed by the people working in that particular industry. So these are some of the things to take note of. Okay, task analysis I already started explaining. It is the statistical technique used to evaluate test item. Sorry, this one is item analysis. The other one I mentioned earlier is task analysis. So the next the next concept that we would like to treat now is the item analysis. Item analysis is a statistical technique that is used to evaluate test items based on their we call them psychometrics properties. They help us to identify what the properties of that particular test item is or are, of course, are. So in carrying out item analysis, you get to find out the difficulty level of that test. You get to find out the discrimination index of that test. You get to also find out how reliable that test is. You also check whether it is biased or not biased. You check whether it is valid or not. So it is a technique that is used to identify items that are performing poorly. Then this is because you will need to revise some of those tests and eliminate or probably eliminate them from the tests. So professional certification programs, they use item analysis to ensure that the test questions that they put in on their exam are reliable and valid. Next, you have what is called test equating. Test equating is a process of comparing test scores from different versions of the same test or from different tests that measure the same construct. The technique is basically used to ensure that scores are comparable across different tests. What that means is, we mentioned one of the things that is done to ensure that you have, that your test is having the required level of integrity, which we call the test security. In the course of that, discussing that, we mentioned that you randomize the test. You randomize the test, you randomize the items. You also can randomize the options. Apart from that, you can just ask, you can have 2 or 3 groups of SMEs, that is subject matter experts, to develop 3 different tests, so which means each group will work on a different test. And these guys will use the same test blueprint, but they will not be, if you like, they will not be in the same room, they will not be in the same location, they will not be doing the job in concert. So the group A will be working independently of group B, and so will group C. They will come up with the same type of test, the same items that are supposed to be addressing the same content, but of course you can see that they are just different versions. So test equating is used in ensuring, in checking, to see how comparable the scores generated from these different versions of the test are. It's a statistical technique, just for the mention. Okay, then we have test reporting. It's indeed, as the name suggests, it is used in communicating the scores or the result of the test to other stakeholders. In issuing certificates, most of the times the scores obtained by test takers in particular items are not usually reported to them, but the scores they made, they obtain are usually reported to the body that is tasked with issuing them their certification. So when you do that, you have done what is called test reporting. Now, all of these things needs to be done in a certain way to ensure that some of the standards, or let me say standards that are set in the field of psychometrics, are not infringed upon. So some of the ways that professional certification program use to communicate the results to their test takers is by way of issuing them certificates. It's by way also of issuing them score reports. In some cases, you find that badges are awarded to the test takers. Quickly, we also have item response theory. It is a statistical technique that is used. When you hear it, item response theory or IRT. There is the other one we call CTT, that is classical test theory. The two of them are all statistical techniques that are used to analyze the performance of the other one. CTT is used to analyze the performance of the testees, whereas item response theory is used to analyze the performance of the test items based on the responses provided by the test takers. All of these things are put together to ensure that the test questions are reliable, they are valid, and they are not biased. So professional certification programs use IRT, or let me say the employer psychometricians that helps them to put in place the techniques that are adopted or followed in ensuring that item response theory is, adhered to. Test scaling is the next. This is a process of converting raw scores into standardized test scores. I don't know how it is done over there in your country, but of course, you discover that in certain, at least, there are grades that are awarded to testees. Let's say, for instance, in a school system, grades are awarded to test takers. Somebody who obtained an A in computer science, that A that he or she obtained can only be equated with another A that is obtained in, let's say, in mathematics. However, the score 80 over 100 may award, or let me say may obtain for a testee an A, but then in another subject, it may only be able to award him a B. So in psychometrics, we do not compare scores of students. I mean, let me say it is not right to compare scores of testees that did not sit for the same subjects, if you like to take it that way, at the same time. Even if it's the same subject, then it has to have been taken the same session of testing. Excuse me. You cannot compare that a student obtained 80 marks in computer science in 2022 and then you cannot compare that another person that obtained 80 marks for the same computer science in 2024. This is because there are a lot of psychometric principles that will come into play to be able to tell us what the level or what that raw score actually means. So the process of making sure that they are converted into standardized scores, it is what we call test scaling. We can use Z-score, we can use T-score to convert scores into standard scores. So that is test scaling. Then test adaptation. It involves modifying a test to meet the needs of specific test takers or groups. Modify tests to meet the needs of specific test takers or groups. These are psychometric concepts. Then we have test analysis. Test analysis involves evaluating the performance of test takers based on their scores and other factors such as demographics and test taking behavior. Like we mentioned when we talk about test scaling, it will be it may not be exactly right to compare the test, the score obtained by a certain disadvantaged group in a society against the exact raw scores obtained by another group that are considered advantaged in the society. All right, so test analysis ensure it takes into account the demographics of such persons. Maybe they are females, or maybe they are socially disadvantaged, and all whatnot. This is what test analysis does. So functional certification uses that to ensure that their tests are fair and are reliable. Then differential functioning, or simply DIF. This is a technique that is employed to check to see if items in a test may be biased against a specific group or groups. So a few steps are taken. For instance, we compare the performance of different groups, such as male versus female, or different ethnic groups on individual test item. Here we'll be able to see or find out if the item is discriminating against any of the groups that serve for the test. Then we have test norming. It's one of the next things that we look at. This involves establishing a baseline for performance on a particular exam by administering the exam to a representative sample of the individuals who have similar characteristics as the target population. So that before you administer as an examination owner or as a vendor, before you administer your test, it is expedient. Excuse me. It is expedient that you first try out your test on a small sample of individuals that possess similar characteristics as the target population that we eventually see for the exam. All of these are geared towards ensuring that there is fairness, there is reliability, and your test is valid and is completely defensible. It also helps certification programs to determine who is qualified to receive a certification. So that is test norming. Then test equivalence is the degree to which different versions of an exam or different versions of the test or forms of the test measure the same construct in a similar manner. Just have to push a little bit faster just because we have a quick quiz that we need to take before we end, and then maybe if there's any of you that may have a question to ask, and then so that we can clarify and then push forward. So we have parameter drift, or we call it item parameter drift. This is a statistical property of a test that helps us to know whether the properties of that test, properties by properties I mean whether the item difficulty or item discrimination or item bias or item reliability or validity is being affected because of the passage of time. Sometimes when the characteristics of test takers change, there may be a tendency that a particular test item begins to experience what is known as item parameter drift, or simply drift. So we carry out this technique to find out which of the items may have started to drift. So therefore, certification managers should be wary of item parameter drift. It means it is required that from time to time, maybe 5 yearly, your exam should be subjected to this parameter drift, so that we can find out if there may be items that are beginning to be susceptible to parameter drift. Next is item calibration or the test calibration. This is a process that is used by professional certification bodies to ensure that the test is accurately measuring the knowledge, the skills, and abilities that are required to perform a particular job. The techniques that are involved is carried out by psychometricians, and of course, certification owners are required to engage. Psychometricians every now and then. I mean, in the process of carrying out an illustration development of their examination or their tests. Thank you very much for listening.